Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey folks, just a quick heads up before we get started. Today's episode is going to be audio only. No video this time, but it's a good one. Stick around. Today, a ceasefire for Gaza.
U.S. President Donald Trump is set to travel not only to Israel, but he's going to Sharm el-Sheikh right after in Egypt to meet with around 20 world leaders to sign this peace plan that he's hoping will change the course of history for the Middle East.
After 2 years of genocide, Palestinian families in Gaza return home. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode and what stories you want us to do next. Or if you're on your podcast app, leave us a review telling us where you're listening from, and please give us a 5-star rating while you're there. It all helps the show.
Hamas has released all 20 living Israeli captives as agreed under the U.S. brokered ceasefire deal. Well, soon after the Israeli captives were released, buses carrying released Palestinian prisoners were seen leaving Ofer prison near Ramallah. That's in the occupied West Bank. Israel is releasing nearly 2,000 Palestinian prisoners.
U.S. President Donald Trump, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, and more than 20 world leaders are meeting in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, for a summit that could mark the end of a modern-day genocide.
It's a great deal for Israel, but it's a great deal for everybody, for Arabs, for Muslims, for everybody, for the world.
Just a few hundred kilometers north, tens of thousands of mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters are returning home to Gaza City.
A ceasefire is a pause in one form of violence, but not everything. There is a challenge ahead of many of these people living inside these tents.
And 48 Israeli captives, living and dead, are expected to be returned.
Desperate Palestinians grab the little food that's coming in, but the needs won't be met until after the Israeli captives are returned.
Al Jazeera's Hamdah Salhut is watching all of this closely.
This has been the most excruciating thing that a human being could ever have to live through, because you have more than 2 million people there who are now with nothing. No homes, no school, no jobs, no resources, and no sort of timeline as to when they're going to regain any sort of normalcy. Anything that they had prior to October 7th, 2023, that's all gone. And they're kind of waiting to see when things will change for the better. And the ceasefire is definitely a good first step in that. My name is Hamdah Salhut. I'm a correspondent for Al Jazeera English, based previously out of occupied East Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And now I work out of Amman, Jordan, and Doha, Qatar at our home base after the ban on the network in May of 2024.
Hamdah, thank you so much for joining us. You've been covering this genocide from all points of view for 2 years now. There was a lot of elation on the streets when the ceasefire agreement was first announced. Now we're a few days in, reality is setting in. Has there been a real change in the quality of life so far for Palestinians and Israelis?
For Palestinians, the answer is no. The immediate danger is out of the way in terms of the nonstop bombing has ceased. For Israelis, there's now a glimmer of hope and a horizon perhaps that would start a new chapter. However, there's so much distrust in their leadership. There's no trust in Netanyahu.
We fought during these 2 years to achieve our war aims. And a central one of these war aims is to return the hostages, all of the hostages, the living and the dead. And we're about to achieve that goal.
This most recent Saturday was the first protest in Hostage Square after Israel ratified the deal. And Steve Witkoff, the American envoy to the Middle East, who has been working at length on these peace agreements, when he spoke, there were a lot of cheers thanking him, thanking President Trump. And when Witkoff tried to thank Netanyahu, the response was so different. It was resounding boos.
To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Prime Minister.
And it wasn't just once, it was twice.
Have both. Okay.
To the point where Witkoff had to interrupt them.
Hamdah, let's start by trying to put this conversation into context. Let's use some numbers. 2 years of this genocide have left around 170,000 Palestinians injured. They require long-term rehabilitation and treatment. Many of them are amputees, blind, or paralyzed. 38 hospitals have been destroyed or forced to close. 25% of children are suffering from acute malnutrition. 96% of households have no access to enough water to meet basic needs. Considering all of this, the totality, the weight of this catastrophe, what would you say is the first order of business for people in Gaza now that the bombing has stopped?
Well, the first order of business for an average Palestinian in Gaza is getting this life-saving humanitarian aid that's supposed to come in mass. There is a famine in Gaza. This has been classified by several international organizations, including the UN. People need to eat. People need to have clean water. The medical supplies that need to come in, because there have been more than 125 hospitals and medical clinics that have either been decimated or completely damaged to the point where they're kind of just, if they have a sort of saline solution to clean a wound, they will do that and bandage it up. And also the shelters that are going to come in, the tents, blankets for people, because it's now mid-October. I know maybe some people don't know this, but it actually gets quite cold in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And at night, there are freezing winds. There is rain. There is sometimes occasionally snow. The tents and mobile homes were actually supposed to come in during the last ceasefire. Israel ultimately ended up violating that ceasefire in March of this year, which is why none of that stuff went in. There is this return that is happening after this massive exodus of Gaza City. But people are going back to the north and finding that they don't have a home. There's definitely a sense of relief that they are not going to be bombarded well into the night. But there's also a sense of fear because this could restart at any moment. There's a fear that perhaps things won't go as planned in the ceasefire because this is the third ceasefire and the two prior to this all collapsed. So people are really kind of nervous to see the outcome of all of this, but there's definitely a huge sigh of relief of people being able to sleep for an entire night now for a couple of nights without this relentless bombing, without the fear of, am I going to bed? Am I going to be waking up in the morning?
Oh, yeah. It's the little things. Just watching our team covering life in Gaza City without their flak jackets on feels significant, feels like small progress. But you also see what people are returning to. There's no homes and many times no family members. Tens of thousands of lives just lost. And still, the hum of Israeli drones overhead serve as this reminder of just how quickly the attacks can start up again. So let's talk about the deal that led to this moment, this pause. In September, U.S. President Donald Trump presented a 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. Which points have been addressed and what's left?
So we're in phase one of Trump's 20-point plan, which a lot of people say was a long time coming. The main things as part of phase one are the release of the 48 hostages held in Gaza. There are 20 of them who are alive, and there are the remains of 28 who are deceased. The second step is the release of Palestinian prisoners. So there will be 250 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli detention to be released. And in addition, 2,000 Palestinians from the Gaza Strip who were taken by Israeli forces and arrested and sitting in Israeli detention facilities. So 2,000 of them will go back. The humanitarian aid will flow into the Strip. And the next steps as part of phase two would sort of be this international body that comes in as a peacekeeping force. And the rate that Hamas demilitarizes is the rate that Israeli forces will withdraw.
Yeah, that's going to be the huge sticking point, is the disarmament of Hamas. You've already seen police patrols, Hamas police patrols around the Strip, and that's getting a lot of consternation. Do you agree with that that's going to be the biggest sticking point?
Well, I think there's going to be quite a few of these sort of sticking points. But the thing is that both parties agreed to this deal. Both parties agreed to phase one. One of the final points in the deal is that if the Palestinian Authority actually makes these reforms and they are to the liking and approval of the Americans and the other international partners at stake here, then there actually could be this prospect to a Palestinian state, which is what most Palestinians are hoping for this sort of recognition of the struggle of what it is to be Palestinian, the self-determination for a people who've had their land occupied for nearly a century.
Yeah. There's a lot of effort from a lot of parties to keep this peace plan in place. Egypt is hosting the negotiations. Turkey is involved. Military forces from many countries will be on the ground. In fact, Qatar will be spearheading the reconstruction and humanitarian efforts. And while we're speaking, the first trucks are said to be entering Gaza. I wonder what you make of all this international cooperation. How essential is this to the success or failure of the ceasefire?
I think personally the ceasefire needed a lot of different guarantors and parties involved. The United States is a huge ally of Israel, specifically under President Donald Trump. Trump is actually able to have this sway over Netanyahu that perhaps the previous administration under Joe Biden couldn't have. And then what the Palestinians have are the other guarantors in the form of Arab states. But it's important to note that these are also allies of the Americans. Yeah. So they're really the two warring parties. There's these sort of guarantees from the people telling them, here's what we're able to come up with as a deal. Does this work for you? And I think people need to understand that in an agreement, not everyone is going to be happy. Not everyone is going to get exactly what they want. So there are a lot of moving parts in negotiations like this, but the mediators and guarantors of the agreement are certainly some of the biggest key players in making sure that it's all set in stone.
We'll have more with Hamdah after this break. So Hamdah, let's talk about reconstruction. Balakrishnan Rajagopal, he's the UN Special Rapporteur. He talked to Al Jazeera this weekend, and he called what happened to Gaza a domicide. I thought this was a really interesting term. He said the destruction of homes and clearing people from the area and making the area uninhabitable is one of the main ways in which the act of genocide has been committed. So rebuilding will be one of the major sticking points. Now, a Trump economic development plan is in the works. The administration is talking about a, quote, special economic zone. Experts have been convened. Development proposals have been crafted, but we are still very low on specifics. There's so much that needs to be done. Where do they even start?
I think that's the hardest question, because you have millions and millions and millions of pounds of debris scattered across the Gaza Strip. And in that debris are unexploded ordnance, which are weapons that were essentially discharged from planes or tanks or vessels in the sea that did not detonate. So those need to be cleared before there can even be any reconstruction. Beyond that, you have the bodies of thousands of Palestinians who are trapped under that debris that also need to be cleared. The identification system, of course, would be really difficult because everything has been destroyed. And a lot of critics of Israel's war on Gaza said that the reason why it's genocide is because they are trying to destroy an entire society. So they killed writers, they killed doctors, they killed journalists, they killed people who contribute to a society to make it functional and successful. You know, when you've killed 70,000 people and that's just who's accounted for, and it's all been live streamed on your phone the entire time, there's no escaping it. There's no running away from it. And many times, actually, the Israelis just sort of said, you know, this sorry, that one was a mistake.
Right.
We're investigating. It won't happen again. But part of the problem there is, how do you trust the aggressor in a situation to investigate its own act, which is why a lot of people also just have no faith in those investigations that followed.
Yeah, Hamdah, that's a really good point about the unexploded ordnance. I mean, we're still finding unexploded ordnance from World War II. Do you feel that people need to reset their time horizon here? We're talking day to day, week to week, but this is a process that's going to last generations, isn't it?
I think people actually know that this is not going to happen overnight, not even within a few years. I mean, it's going to take more than a decade to rebuild Gaza. It's going to take tens of billions of dollars, not millions, to rebuild everything that was lost and destroyed. We are still so far from any of that.
Yeah. There's the issue of governance next. According to Trump's 20-point plan, Gaza will be run by a committee supervised by a new international transitional body, the, quote, Board of Peace. This will be headed and chaired by President Trump and other heads of state to be determined. Also, former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. I saw someone quip online, was Arthur Balfour not available? One Hamas official, Bassem Naim, spoke to Sky News and already rejected Tony Blair's involvement.
And I don't believe that he will be very welcomed or will be a very positive input in this case. Again, Palestinians have a lot of independent, technocratic cadres or leaders who can do the job in the best interest of the Palestinian people.
How is this Board of Peace idea playing with the people that you're talking to?
I think you have to think about what the Palestinian people want. They've been looking for moderate leadership that represents them for decades. And I think every time someone or something came around, it really wasn't what they had hoped for or expected. And this includes the occupied West Bank. So the people who live under the Palestinian Authority don't like them. They don't have a high approval rating. They don't have this sort of backing from the people, especially under their president, Mahmoud Abbas. And polling done a couple of years ago about his successor, who is Hussein al-Sheikh, showed him polling at around a 2% approval rating.
Wow.
So for most of the Palestinian population, it's not a good option because they've seen life under the PA, they've lived life under the PA, and to put it simply, it sucks. There is no sort of economic prosperity. There are fears of constant corruption. There are fears that critics will be silenced. But what a lot of people are waiting to see is, who is this body of people that are going to be Palestinian, going to run Gaza? Who are they going to be? What are they going to be about? And then the hopes after all of this is that there will be some sort of free and fair elections so that the people can finally decide what it is they want for themselves. And I think most people are taking the wait and see option on that.
So finally, Hamdah, a previous guest on The Take, Deanna Boutou, who once served as a legal advisor to the Palestinian negotiating team, put this ceasefire deal in pretty stark terms.
No one is happier that Israel's bombs will finally stop than Palestinians. No one. We can finally start to try to locate and bury our dead. We can finally breathe. And yet, we're worried. For more than 2 weeks since President Trump announced his 20-point plan, we've been explaining over and over again just how repulsive it is that Palestinians have been required to negotiate an end to their own genocide, that we've been required to negotiate an end to their famine. Really? We should be negotiating with the very people that have been starving us?
And it's worth remembering, and frankly hard to forget, that not that long ago, Donald Trump was asking leaders of surrounding Arab countries like Jordan, where you are now, to be prepared to take in refugees. He was proposing a seaside resort for Gaza. But now he's authored this deal that has the people of Gaza, Palestinians, returning to their land, returning to their homes, even though their homes are no longer there. I mean, talk about whiplash. Despite the cautious optimism, I imagine people are preparing for a few more wild swings before this is all said and done.
I think the idea of expelling the Palestinian population from their homeland and the United States taking it over, this was presented back in February of this year by Trump. This idea was condemned internationally to kick out 2 million people from their homeland and take it over and turn it into some sort of business project. After that, the sort of feeling was, okay, we're not going to have to leave the homeland. And this was something that Arab mediators pushed for, that the Palestinian people need to stay in Gaza. And those who've left, those who do leave, will also have the ability to return at some point. So I think there's still a lot of fear amongst Palestinians. Are they going to be able to live in Gaza forever? Are they going to be forced to live somewhere else? Because that's not part of their plan. They wanted to live long, prosperous lives in Gaza. I think it's also important for people to know that while things in Gaza pre-October 7th, of course, seemed relatively normal, Gaza was never a normal place because of the Israeli siege that has been in place for nearly 20 years. Most people in Gaza have never stepped foot outside of Gaza. They've never met a person from outside of Gaza. They've never been on an airplane. That was the situation of a people living under a brutal and suffocating siege.
Israel had calorie restrictions for the people of Gaza before October 7th. So yes, very important point. And I think there's also a sense on the Israeli side that like, okay, it's ceasefire, we'll all go back to normal, but they're going to be uncovering details of this atrocity for decades to come, aren't they?
There are definitely going to be a lot of different healing processes that are taking place, especially because what has happened to the people is something that it's nothing that's been seen before, and the proof is all there on our phones. And now, of course, with the insurmountable number of deaths, with the number of people who've been injured, with the number of people who've had limbs amputated, there needs to be a sort of different kind of approach to how to deal with a conflict like this in the future. How did we get to this point, I think, is what a lot of people always wonder. And what can we do as human beings to make sure that something like this never happens again?
Yeah.
Because you have nearly 70,000 people killed. That's just what's recorded. Nearly 200,000 people injured. And most of them with lifelong injuries that they're going to suffer from for the rest of their days. And really, really horrific images that have come out of this war are things that I hope as a people living on this earth, we never see again. And I hope that as part of this peace plan, there's a way forward to making sure that no conflict gets to this level, that no country like Israel is able to inflict this type of destruction, not just on a place, but on an entire people.
Yeah. And the international community has to be allowed to, or it needs to insist on going into Gaza and helping out and documenting all of this. Well, Hamdah, thank you so much for coming on The Take. Thank you for reporting. And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Amy Walters and David Enders, with Duha Mosaad and me, Kevin Hirten. It was edited by Kylene Kiang and Nay Alvarez. The Take production team is Marcos Bartolomé, Sonia Bhagat, Spencer Cline, Sarí el-Khalili, Tracie Hunte, Tamara Khandaker, Kylene Kiang, Phillip Lanos, Chloe K. Lee, Melanie Marich, Duha Mosaad, Halima Shah, Amy Walters, and Noor Wazwaz. Our editorial interns are Farhan Rafid and Fatima Shafiq. And I'm your host, Kevin Hirten. Our engagement producers are Adam Abu-Gad and Vienna Malio. Andrew Grenier is lead of audience engagement. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Joe Plord mixed this episode. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohamed El-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer. Nay Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.